Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Life-Changing True Stories. Asterisk Callum. Thorne stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse apartment in downtown Seattle, watching the city lights flicker to life as evening descended. At 35 years old, she possessed the kind of natural elegance that turned heads without effort. Her auburn hair fell in soft waves past her shoulders, framing a face with gentle brown eyes that once sparkled with joy, but now held a distant sadness. She wore a cream cashmere sweater and tailored gray slacks, looking every bit the successful woman she was, yet feeling entirely empty inside. The sound of the front door opening barely registered. She had learned to expect it around this time, 9:30 at night, sometimes later. Her husband, Julian Blackwood, had become as predictable as the tides, arriving home long after dinner, his mind occupied with business deals and corporate strategies that seemed infinitely more interesting than his wife. "Callum, I'm home," Julian's deep voice echoed through the marble foyer. There was no warmth in the greeting, just a habitual announcement of his presence. She did not turn around. Instead, she continued staring at the city below, wondering when exactly she had become invisible in her own marriage. Julian appeared in the living room, loosening his silver tie. At 42, he remained devastatingly handsome, with his dark hair touched with distinguished gray at the temples, sharp jawline, and intense green eyes that had once made her heart race. He stood 6 feet tall with the confidence of a man who commanded boardrooms and built empires. His tailored black suit probably cost more than most people earned in a month, and he wore success like a second skin. "Have you eaten?" he asked, moving toward the bar where he poured himself 2 fingers of expensive scotch. The question felt mechanical, part of a script they had been following for months. "Hours ago," Callum replied softly, finally turning to face him. "There is leftover salmon in the refrigerator if you want it." Julian nodded absently, his attention already drifting to his phone. The blue light illuminated his face as he scrolled through emails, completely disconnected from the woman standing just 15 feet away. This was their life now. 2 strangers sharing an expensive space, going through the motions of a marriage that had died somewhere along the way without either of them noticing the exact moment. "I have to fly to Tokyo tomorrow," Julian said without looking up. "For days, maybe 5. Do you need anything before I leave?" The question pierced through Callum like a cold blade. "Do you need anything?" As if she were an employee, a housekeeper, anyone but his wife. She felt tears threatening to surface, but pushed them down. She had learned not to cry in front of Julian anymore. He had no patience for emotions, viewing them as inefficient obstacles to productivity. "No," she whispered. "I do not need anything." That was a lie. She needed everything. She needed to be seen, to be heard, to matter to the man she had married 7 years ago. She needed the Julian who had pursued her relentlessly when they first met, who had written her love letters, who had made her laugh until her sides ached. She needed the man who had promised her the world and then slowly, methodically, taken it all away by replacing her with his ambition. The escape 3 days later. Callum found herself on a train heading north toward the coastal town of Ravensport. She had made the decision impulsively the morning after Julian left for Tokyo. While packing his suitcase, she had come across old photographs tucked in his dresser drawer. Pictures of him with a woman she did not recognize. A beautiful blonde with piercing blue eyes, laughing at something beyond the camera frame. The photos were dated from 8 years ago, just before Callum and Julian had met. She had said nothing about the discovery. Instead, she had called her oldest friend, Tessa Monroe, a free-spirited artist who lived in Ravensport, and asked if she could visit. Tessa had immediately sensed something was wrong and insisted, "Callum, come right away." The train journey gave Callum time to think. She watched the landscape change from urban sprawl to rolling hills and finally to rugged coastline. The ocean appeared like a revelation, wild and untamed, stretching endlessly toward the horizon. She felt something stir inside her, something she had forgotten existed. Hope, perhaps. Or maybe just the possibility of feeling alive again. Tessa met her at the small train station with a crushing hug. "You look terrible," she said with characteristic bluntness, holding Callum at arm's length to examine her. "When was the last time you actually smiled?" Callum tried to remember and could not. "I do not know," she admitted. Then we have work to do, Tessa declared, linking her arm through Callum's. Starting with reminding you who you were before you became Mrs. Julian Blackwood. Tessa's cottage sat perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean. It was everything Callum's penthouse was not. Warm, cluttered with books and paintings, smelling of coffee and sea salt. That first night, they stayed up late drinking wine and talking. Callum found herself pouring out everything. The loneliness, the feeling of being invisible, the growing suspicion that Julian had never fully committed his heart to their marriage. Tessa said suddenly. Right now, of you being happy, of you being yourself without him. Why? Callum asked, confused. Because you need to remember what it looks like, Tessa replied, and maybe he needs to see it too. The next morning, they walked along the beach. The sun was brilliant. The waves crashed against the rocks with magnificent power. And for the first time in months, Callum felt something other than numbness. She wore a flowing white sundress that Tessa had lent her, and the ocean breeze lifted her hair. She laughed at something Tessa said, a real laugh that came from somewhere deep inside. Psst, there, Tessa exclaimed, pulling out her phone. That is the Callum I remember. Stay right there. The photo captured Callum mid-laugh, the ocean behind her, the sunlight making her hair glow like copper. She looked radiant, free, alive. She looked like someone who existed beyond the shadow of her marriage, the photograph that changed everything that evening. Sitting on Tessa's porch with a glass of wine, Callum stared at the photo for a long time. It showed a version of herself she barely recognized anymore. Without overthinking it, she opened her social media app and posted the image with a simple caption, remembering how to breathe. Ravensport, you are healing me. She did not think about Julian seeing it. She did not consider how it might appear to him. She simply wanted to mark the moment, to claim this small piece of happiness for herself. 800 miles away in Tokyo, Julian Blackwood sat in a late-night business dinner, barely listening to the Japanese executives discussing merger terms. His phone buzzed with a notification. He glanced at it absently, then froze completely. There on his screen was his wife, looking more beautiful than he had seen her in years. But it was not just her beauty that struck him. It was her expression. Pure joy, genuine happiness. The kind of happiness he suddenly realized she never showed around him anymore. His chest tightened with an emotion he barely recognized. Jealousy. Raw, consuming jealousy. Who had taken that photo? Who was making her laugh like that? Where was Ravensport, and why had she not told him she was going there? He opened the comments section and saw dozens of responses. You look amazing. Whoever put that smile on your face, keep them around. Glowing girl? Each comment felt like a punch to his gut. Julian excused himself from the dinner, claiming sudden illness. Back in his hotel room, he stared at the photo for hours, zooming in on every detail. The dress he had never seen before. The relaxed posture. The genuine smile. This was not the careful, controlled woman who lived in his penthouse. This was someone else entirely. Someone he had lost without even noticing. He tried calling her. The call went straight to voicemail. He sent a text. I saw your photo. Call me. We need to talk. No response came. For the first time in their 7-year marriage. Julian Blackwood realized with crushing clarity that he might lose his wife, and the thought terrified him in a way no business failure ever had. He had taken her for granted, treated her like a beautiful accessory to his successful life. And now she was slipping away. He booked the first flight back to Seattle, canceling the rest of his business trip. His assistant protested, but Julian did not care. For once, something mattered more than his empire. But Callum was not in Seattle. She was in Ravensport, finally breathing freely, unaware that the simple act of reclaiming her joy had set in motion a series of events that would either destroy her marriage completely or force them both to face truths they had been avoiding for years. The photo had been posted. The jealousy had been triggered, and nothing would ever be the same again. Julian's flight landed in Seattle at 3 a.m. He drove directly to the penthouse, his hands gripping the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity. The apartment was dark and empty, confirming what he already knew. Callum was not there. He had never felt such emptiness in a space before. Every corner of their home suddenly felt like a monument to his failures. He sat on their bed, still wearing his wrinkled suit from the flight, and looked at her photo again. In the soft light of dawn creeping through the windows, he forced himself to confront an uncomfortable truth. He could not remember the last time he had really looked at his wife. Not just glanced at her in passing, but truly seen her. When had she stopped being a person to him and become just another part of his carefully constructed life? His phone rang. It was his business partner, David Chen, calling about the abandoned Tokyo deal. Julian ignored it. He opened his laptop and searched for Ravensport, discovering it was a small coastal town for hours north. Without hesitation, he threw some clothes in a bag and headed for his car. The drive gave him too much time to think. Memories flooded back, unbidden and painful. He remembered meeting Callum at a charity gala 7 years ago. She had been wearing a midnight blue dress. When she spoke about her work in environmental architecture, her passion had been magnetic. He had pursued her relentlessly for 3 months before she agreed to marry him. But there was something else, something darker that gnawed at the edges of those memories. Nina Hartley. The woman from the photographs Callum must have found. Julian's jaw clenched. Nina had been his fiancée before Callum. They'd been together for 5 years, and she had been pregnant when he met Callum. The guilt of that time still haunted him in ways he had never admitted to anyone, least of all his wife. The confrontation Callum was sitting on the beach when she saw Julian's black Mercedes pull up near Tessa's cottage. Her heart sank. She had known he would come eventually, but she had hoped for more time. Time to figure out what she wanted. Time to remember who she was without him. Julian walked across the sand toward her, looking completely out of place in his expensive shoes and designer jacket. The ocean wind whipped his hair, and she could see dark circles under his eyes. He looked exhausted, almost broken. It was the most human she had seen him in years. "Callum," he said, stopping a few feet away from her. His voice was rough, strained. "We need to talk." "I know," she replied quietly, not standing up. "But I am not sure I am ready to hear what you have to say." He sat down beside her, without asking permission, close, but not touching. For several minutes, they just sat there, listening to the waves. Finally, Julian spoke. "I saw your photo, and I realized something terrible." He paused, struggling with the words. "I realized that you were happier without me, that I have made you miserable for so long that leaving was the only way you could smile again." Callum felt tears welling up but refused to let them fall. "You made me invisible, Julian. I became a ghost in my own life." "I know," he whispered, "and I do not have an excuse good enough to justify it. But I need you to understand something. I need to tell you about Nina." Callum's breath caught. "So he knew she had found the photographs. Who is she?" "She was my fiancée before you. We were together for 5 years. She was pregnant when I met you." The words came out in a rush, as if he had been holding them in for too long. "I fell in love with you so quickly, so completely, that I broke off our engagement. 2 weeks later, she lost the baby. The doctor said the stress might have been a factor." Callum turned to stare at him, horror and understanding dawning simultaneously. "You built our entire marriage on someone else's tragedy." "Yes," Julian's voice broke, "and I have carried that guilt every single day. It poisoned everything. I threw myself into work because it was the only thing that did not remind me of what I had done. And in doing that, I pushed you away. I made you pay for my sins." The revelation hung between them like a physical weight. Callum stood up, needing to move, needing space. "Did you ever love me, Julian? Or was I just an escape from your guilt?" "I loved you," he said fiercely, standing to face her. "I still love you. But I loved you wrong. I loved you like you were a prize I had won, not a partner I was supposed to build a life with." "The hidden truth there is more, isn't there?" Callum asked, her intuition suddenly sharp. "I can see it in your eyes." "What else have you been hiding?" Julian looked away, toward the horizon. When he spoke again, his voice was barely audible over the waves. "For the first 6 months of our marriage, I kept seeing Nina. Not romantically," he added quickly, seeing Callum's face. "But I would go to her apartment and we would talk. I was confused, terrified that I had made the wrong choice. Every time we argued, every time marriage felt hard, I would run to her. Callum felt like the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. 6 months. You spent half a year of our marriage running to another woman? I was weak and scared and stupid, Julian said desperately. But I stopped, Callum. I chose you. I chose us. When? She demanded. When did you finally decide I was worth staying for? On our 6-month anniversary? You had planned this entire evening, cooked my favorite meal, wore that green dress I loved, and I came home 3 hours late because I had been with Nina, listening to her tell me how I had ruined her life. I walked in and saw you asleep on the couch, still in that dress, and I realized what I was throwing away. I ended it with Nina that night. I swear to you, Callum, I have not seen her since. Callum wrapped her arms around herself, feeling cold despite the warm sun. Do you understand what you are telling me? That for 6 months, I was building a marriage while you were keeping one foot out the door. That every moment of happiness I felt was based on a lie. I know, Julian said, tears streaming down his face openly now. I know, and I cannot take it back. All I can do is tell you the truth now, and beg you to give me a chance to be the husband I should have been from the beginning. It is too late for begging. Julian. Callum's voice was steady now, cold, with a new kind of clarity. Because there is something else you need to know. Nina called me 2 days ago. Julian's face went white. What? She somehow got my number? She told me everything, Julian. About the pregnancy, about your visits, about how you promised her you would leave me. But she also told me something you did not mention. Callum pulled out her phone and showed him a text message. She is demanding $500,000 to stay quiet. She is blackmailing you, and by extension, me. Julian staggered backward as if physically struck. I never promised to leave you. I was confused, but I never said that. It does not matter what you said or did not say, Callum replied. What matters is that this woman has been a shadow over our entire marriage, and now she wants to be paid for her silence. The question is, what are we going to do about it? The public reckoning, the answer came sooner than either of them expected. That evening, as they sat in Tessa's cottage trying to figure out their next move, Julian's phone exploded with notifications. His business partner David was calling frantically. Julian, where are you? The story just broke. It is everywhere. Julian pulled up the news on his laptop and felt his world crumble. The headline screamed, Tech billionaire Julian Blackwood's dark secret. Abandoned pregnant fiancé for current wife. Nina had gone to the press, but her story was carefully crafted, painting herself as the victim and Julian as a heartless villain who had destroyed her life. There were quotes from unnamed sources, details about his visits during his marriage to Callum, and worst of all, photographs of them together from those 6 months. Callum read over his shoulder, her face unreadable. Well, she said finally, I suppose that makes the decision easier. Callum, please, Julian started, but she held up her hand. No, listen to me carefully, Julian Blackwood. Your life is about to become a public spectacle. Your business will suffer. Your reputation will be destroyed. And you have a choice to make right now. She stood in front of him, and for the first time in their marriage, she looked like the powerful woman he had first fallen in love with. Strong, certain, unbreakable. You can either run away from this, hide behind lawyers and public relations teams, and let everyone else clean up your mess, she continued. Or you can face it head on. Tell the complete truth. Accept responsibility. And prove to me, and to everyone else, that you are capable of being more than your worst mistakes. Julian looked at her with something like awe. You are not leaving me. I have not decided yet, she said honestly. But if there is any chance of saving this marriage, it starts with you being the man I thought I married. The man who is brave enough to face consequences. Julian stood up, took a deep breath, and made a decision that would change everything. He called his assistant and arranged an emergency press conference for the next morning. No lawyers, no prepared statements, just him and the truth. The truth revealed the press conference took place in Seattle, in the lobby of Julian's company headquarters. Cameras flashed as he walked to the podium with Callum by his side. The room was packed with journalists, all eager for blood. Julian gripped the edges of the podium and looked directly into the cameras. My name is Julian Blackwood, and I am here to tell you the truth about my past. 7 years ago, I was engaged to Nina Hartley. She was pregnant with our child when I met Callum Thorne. I fell in love with Callum in a way I had never experienced before, and I made the cowardly decision to end my engagement to Nina without properly considering the consequences. The room erupted with shouted questions, but Julian continued. Nina lost the baby 2 weeks after I left her. I will carry the guilt of that for the rest of my life. Instead of dealing with that guilt, I buried myself in work and failed my new wife in countless ways. For the first 6 months of my marriage to Callum, I maintained contact with Nina out of guilt and confusion. I was wrong. I hurt 2 extraordinary women because I was too weak to face my own actions. He paused, looking at Callum, who stood beside him with quiet dignity. Recently, Nina contacted my wife, demanding money in exchange for her silence. Instead of paying her, we are here telling you everything. Because my wife taught me that the only way forward is through honesty, not hiding. A journalist shouted, Mr. Blackwood, do you expect us to believe you suddenly found your conscience? Julian shook his head. No, I expect you to believe that I finally found someone strong enough to make me face myself. My wife could have left me.
Ow.
She still might. But she gave me the chance to be better, and I am taking it. He looked back at the cameras. I am not asking for forgiveness. I am not asking for sympathy. I am simply stating the facts and accepting whatever consequences come from my actions. My company may suffer. My reputation is already destroyed. But I would rather live in truth than hide behind lies for one more day. The press conference lasted another 30 minutes of brutal questions. Through it all, Callum stood beside him, silent but present. When it finally ended, they walked out together through a gauntlet of flashing cameras. In the car, Julian turned to her. Thank you for standing with me. I was not standing with you, Callum corrected gently. I was standing for the truth. There is a difference. Are you going to leave me? He asked, his voice raw with fear. Callum looked at him for a long moment. I do not know yet, Julian. You finally showed me honesty today, but honesty is just the first step. You need to show me change, real, lasting change. You need to show me that you can be a partner, not just a provider. That you can see me, really see me, every single day. I will, he promised. I will spend the rest of my life proving it to you if you let me. With therapy. Together. And you will clear your schedule, because I am not competing with your company anymore. You want to save this marriage? You will make me your priority. Julian nodded, understanding that this was not forgiveness. This was a chance, single, fragile chance to rebuild something that had been broken for far too long. The weeks following the press conference were brutal. Julian's company stock plummeted by 40% in 3 days. Major clients withdrew their contracts. Board members demanded his resignation. The media had a field day dissecting every aspect of his life. Internet commentators were ruthless in their judgment. Through it all, Callum watched her husband face consequences for the first time in his privileged life, and something unexpected happened. He did not run, did not hide. He showed up to every meeting, faced every angry investor, answered every difficult question with the same painful honesty. He had shown at the press conference. They started therapy 3 times a week with Dr. Patricia Williams, a no-nonsense psychologist who specialized in rebuilding broken marriages. The sessions were excruciating. Dr. Williams forced them to confront patterns they had been avoiding for years. Julian, you treated your wife like an employee you were trying to keep satisfied rather than a partner you were building a life with, Dr. Williams said during their 4th session. Callum, you made yourself invisible instead of demanding to be seen. You both contributed to this dysfunction. Callum bristled at that. I contributed. I was faithful. I was supportive. I did everything right. You were silent, Dr. Williams countered. You accepted scraps when you deserved a feast. That is not love. That is fear of abandonment, dressed up as patience. The words struck Callum like a lightning bolt. She realized the therapist was right. She had been so afraid of losing Julian that she had lost herself instead. She had made herself smaller and smaller, hoping that would make him love her more. She could not earn love through diminishment. Julian was having his own revelations. I think I was always waiting for the other shoe to drop, he admitted one evening, as they walked through a park near their apartment. Like I did not deserve happiness with you because of how we started. So I sabotaged it slowly, keeping you at a distance so it would hurt less when you eventually left. That is a self-fulfilling prophecy, Callum said. You pushed me away because you feared losing me, which almost made you lose me. I know that now. He stopped walking and turned to face her. Callum, I want to ask you something. Will you come with me to see Nina? Callum's eyes widened. Why would we do that? Because we need closure. All three of us. This triangle has existed for 7 years and it needs to end properly. Will you come with me? After a long pause, Callum nodded. Yes, but I have conditions. The final confrontation, they met Nina Hartley at a cafe in Portland. Neutral territory for all of them. Nina arrived looking polished and cold, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her designer clothes immaculate. But Callum could see the pain beneath the polish. This was a woman who had been genuinely hurt. They sat at a corner table, the tension thick enough to cut. Nina looked between them with barely concealed hostility. So the perfect couple comes to face the damaged ex. How generous of you. We are not here to fight, Julian said quietly. We are here to apologize and to release each other. Nina laughed bitterly. Release each other? You destroyed my life, Julian. You do not get to release me from that. You are right, Julian agreed, and Nina seemed taken aback by his immediate agreement.
Right. I made choices that devastated you, and nothing I say can undo that damage.
But Nina, you have spent 7 years making yourself a victim of my choices. At some point, you have to decide to move forward. Easy for you to say, Nina snapped. You got everything you wanted? Did I? Julian leaned forward. I got a wife. I treated terribly because I was drowning in guilt over you. I built a marriage on secrets and shame. I nearly lost the woman I love because I could not let go of the past. Is that what you wanted from me? Because that is what my guilt gave you power over? Callum spoke for the first time. Nina, I am sorry for the role I played in your pain. I did not know about you or the baby when Julian and I got together, but my happiness still came at your expense. That is a truth I have to live with. Nina's eyes filled with tears. Do you know what the worst part was? It was not losing Julian. It was losing who I thought I was. I thought I was the kind of woman men chose. I thought I was enough. Then in one moment, I learned I was neither of those things. That was never about you being enough, Callum said gently. It was about Julian being broken and making broken choices. You did not deserve what happened to you. But Nina, neither did I. We were both hurt by the same man's inability to face himself. The simple truth of that statement seemed to break something in Nina. She put her face in her hands and wept, deep sobs that shook her shoulders. Julian did not move to comfort her. That was not his place anymore. Instead, Callum reached across the table and took Nina's hand. We can all stay trapped in this, Callum said softly, or we can choose to let each other go. I'm choosing to. Let go of the fantasy of a perfect marriage that never existed. Julian is choosing to let go of his guilt.
Now, what will you choose to let go of?
Nina looked up, her mascara running, her perfect facade crumbling. I want to let go of hating you both. I want to let go of the woman I was supposed to be with him and find out who I actually am. They talked for 2 more hours. It was painful and raw and necessary. They would never be friends. But by the end, there was something like peace between them. Nina agreed to drop her financial demands. Not because they forced her, but because she realized money would not heal what was truly broken. As they left the cafe, Julian turned to Nina one last time. I hope you find real happiness, Nina. The kind that comes from inside, not from someone else choosing you. Nina nodded. And for the first time, there was no bitterness in her expression. Just tired acceptance. I hope you both find what you were looking for too. Julian, try not to waste the second chance she is giving you. Rebuilding 6 months after the press conference, Julian had lost his position as CEO of his company. The board had forced him out, unable to weather the scandal. His personal wealth remained intact, but his empire had crumbled. Surprisingly, he seemed lighter without it. I spent 20 years building something that almost cost me everything that actually mattered, he told Callum one evening. They were in their apartment, but it felt different now. They had removed most of the cold modern furniture and replaced it with warmer pieces. There were photographs on the walls now, real moments captured honestly. What do you want to build now? Callum asked. A life, Julian said simply. A real one. It's with you, if you will still have me. Callum had been thinking about this question for months. Julian had changed. Not overnight, not perfectly, but genuinely. He attended therapy without complaint. He listened when she spoke. He made her a priority. He had learned to be present, but was it enough? Could she forgive him? Could she trust him? "I want to show you something," she said, pulling out her laptop. She opened a document she'd been working on for weeks. "I have been offered a position leading an environmental architecture project in Ravensport. It is a 3-year commitment to redesign the entire coastal development sustainably." Julian looked at the proposal, then at her. "That is an incredible opportunity." "It means leaving Seattle," Callum continued. "It means leaving behind this life we built here. It means starting over in a small town where nobody knows us as Julian and Callum Blackwood, the scandal couple. We would just be two people trying to build something new." Understanding dawned on Julian's face. "You're asking me to come with you. I am asking if you would choose me over your comfort, over your remaining business connections, over the life you have always known. I am asking if you love me enough to start over with nothing guaranteed." Julian did not hesitate. "When do we leave?" New beginnings? They moved to Ravensport in early spring. Julian sold the penthouse and most of their possessions. They bought a small house near the cliffs, nothing like their former luxury, but infinitely more of a home. Julian started a consulting business helping tech startups with ethical frameworks. Using his cautionary tale as a teaching tool, Callum threw herself into the coastal development project with renewed passion. She was brilliant at her work, and without Julian's shadow looming over her, people finally saw her genius clearly. She received awards, speaking invitations, recognition that had always been overshadowed by her husband's larger presence. They went to therapy every week. They learned to fight fairly, to speak honestly, to be vulnerable without weaponizing that vulnerability. It was not easy. There were nights when old patterns resurfaced, when Callum felt invisible again or Julian retreated into work, but now they had tools to address it. They had commitment to working through it. 8 months after moving to Ravensport, Callum woke up feeling nauseous. She took a test alone in their bathroom, her hands shaking as she waited for the result. When the positive sign appeared, she felt a complicated rush of emotions. Fear, joy, uncertainty, hope. She found Julian on the back deck, drinking coffee and watching the ocean. "We need to talk," she said, sitting beside him. He immediately looked concerned. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong." She took a breath. "I am pregnant." Julian's face went through a series of expressions: shock, fear, and finally pure joy. "Pregnant? You are pregnant?" "Yes, and I am terrified." Callum's voice trembled. "I am terrified because I remember what pregnancy meant in your past. I am terrified that this will bring back all the old guilt and patterns. I am terrified that I am not ready to share you with another person when I am just getting you back." Julian set down his coffee and took both her hands in his. "Callum, listen to me. This is not the same. You are not Nina. I am not the same man I was. And this baby is not built on secrets or guilt. This baby is a chance for us to create something beautiful together." "You really think we can do this?" she asked. "I think we have already survived the worst," Julian said. "Everything from here is building something new. And yes, I think we can do this. I know we can." 2 years later, the small art gallery in Ravensport was packed with people admiring the photography exhibition. The theme was transformation, and every photograph told a story of change. There were images of the coastline at different seasons, buildings in various stages of construction, and portraits of townspeople who had reinvented themselves. But the centerpiece of the exhibition was a series of 3 photographs of Callum. The first was the photo Tessa had taken 2 years ago, Callum laughing on the beach, alone and free. The second showed her standing in the same spot a year later, visibly pregnant, with Julian beside her, both of them facing the ocean. The third was recent, Callum holding their daughter Violet, while Julian knelt beside them. All 3 of them looking at the camera with genuine smiles. "It is quite a journey," Tessa said, appearing beside Callum at the exhibition. From that first photo to now, Callum smiled, watching Julian across the room with Violet on his hip. Their daughter had his dark hair and her brown eyes, and at 18 months old, she was fearless and curious. Yes, it has been quite a journey. Are you happy? Tessa asked. It was the same question she had asked 2 years ago when Callum first arrived in Ravensport, broken and lost. I am, Callum said, and meant it. Not perfect. We still have hard days. But I am happy in a real way, not in the fantasy way I thought I wanted. Julian saw her looking at him and smiled, that genuine smile that had taken so much work to reclaim. He walked over with Violet, who immediately reached for her mother, Mama. Violet squealed. Look! Look! She was holding a small toy boat that someone had given her. Everything was an adventure when you were 18 months old. Callum took her daughter and breathed in her baby smell, feeling grateful for this messy, complicated, beautiful life they had built from the ashes of the old one. Should we head home? Julian asked. It is almost bedtime. Yes, Callum agreed. Let us go home. They walked out of the gallery together, a family. Not a perfect family. Not a family without scars or history or complicated beginnings. But a real family built on truth and hard work, and the daily choice to keep choosing each other as they drove along the coastal road with Violet babbling in the back seat. Callum thought about the photo that had started everything. The photo of her laughing alone on the beach, rediscovering herself. She had thought that freedom meant being without Julian. But she had learned that real freedom was being fully herself with him. Real love was not about completing each other. It was about being whole separately and choosing to build something together. Julian reached over and took her hand. What are you thinking about? I am thinking that jealousy saved our marriage, Callum said with a smile. Your jealousy over a photograph woke you up, and my jealousy for the life I deserved woke me up. Strange how that works, Julian mused. We had to almost lose everything to learn how to actually have it. Would you change anything? Callum asked. If you could go back, would you do it all differently? Julian was quiet for a moment, considering. I would change how I hurt you and Nina. I would change my cowardice and my lies. But I would not change ending up here with you and Violet, in this life we built from the ruins. It was not a perfect answer, but it was an honest one. And honesty, Callum had learned, was worth more than perfection ever could be. They arrived home to their small house on the cliff. The house that was not a penthouse, that did not have marble floors or designer furniture, but had something far more valuable. It had love that was earned, not assumed. It had forgiveness that was worked for, not demanded. It had a future that was built together, not taken for granted. As they put Violet to bed and she finally fell asleep with her toy boat clutched in her small hand, Julian and Callum stood in the doorway watching her breathe. I love you, Julian whispered. I love you in a way I did not know how to love you before. I know, Callum whispered back. And I love you too. Not the fantasy of you, but the real, flawed, trying human you. They walked out onto their back deck and stood together watching the stars reflect on the ocean. The same ocean that had witnessed Callum's first moment of reclaimed joy 2 years ago. The same ocean that now witnessed their hard-won peace. Sometimes love stories are not about finding the perfect person. Sometimes they are about becoming better people for each other. Sometimes they are about destroying the old version of a relationship so completely that the only choice is to build something entirely new from what remains. Julian and Callum had learned this truth the hardest way possible, but they had learned it together. And that made all the difference. In the end, the photograph had not destroyed their marriage. It had saved it by forcing them both to see what they had been refusing to look at. Sometimes the greatest act of love is not staying together through everything. Sometimes it is being willing to tear everything apart to discover what is truly worth keeping and what they kept. What they built, what they created from the ruins of their old life, was something neither of them could have imagined. It was messy and imperfect and required constant work, but it was real. And real, they had discovered, was so much better than the fantasy had ever been. The ocean waves crashed against the cliffs below their home. It's constant and eternal. And above them, the stars shone on. Witnesses to one couple's journey from perfection to honesty, from fantasy to reality. From almost losing everything to finding what actually mattered, their story was not a fairy tale. It was better. It was true. D&D, sometimes the best love stories are not about perfect beginnings, but about imperfect people choosing to become better together. Sometimes jealousy over a simple photograph can wake us up to what we are about to lose. And sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone is the truth, even when it burns everything down. Because only from those ashes can something real finally grow.